Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. My name is Dru Levasseur, and I'm the Deputy Program Officer with the National LGBT Bar. And I am so thrilled to be kicking off our podcast for the National LGBT Bar with Kellye Testy. I'm so glad we could get her because she's in high demand right now during this very difficult time. So thank you, Kellye, for being here. And if you don't mind saying hello to people and maybe telling us a little bit about your amazing background.
Well, thank you, Dru. And I can't thank you enough for having me with you today. I was really excited when you reached out and so eager to talk with law school candidates, and particularly candidates that may, as in the rest, as we all experience in the rest of the world, have, some additional barriers due to our sexuality or gender, whatever, many different parts of our identities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a real pleasure to be with you. And I think for those of you who don't know me as well, let me say that right now I'm serving as the president and CEO of the Law School Admission Council. And the Law School Admission Council is really the admission hub for law schools and candidates. And we help to even the playing field and make sure that all that happens out in an admission is as fair as possible. And before that, Dru, I think you know that I served as a law school dean and professor for a number of years. And most recently at the University of Washington in Seattle, I was the dean there for 8 years. And before that at Seattle University for around 5. And I also like to share that during that time, not only did I teach in some of the business areas, but I also taught law and sexuality and really enjoyed that. I worked with all of our outlaws groups and, many of the students. I loved working with all of our students. So it's a real pleasure to be with all of you today and to have this chance to talk.
Well, thank you so much. One of the things that stood out when I was looking at your amazing bio was you talk about being a first college grad in your family. I just really wanted to highlight that because I think that's something that really relates to a lot of people I've been hearing from right now.
Yeah, and I'm really proud of that. I am a first generation college grad, and I grew up in a really small town in Indiana where it would have been, easy to have a hard time, when I came out to my parents, and my parents are just awesome. They actually have 3 gay children out of 3.
Wow,
So,
good for them.
They were high school sweethearts in small town Indiana, and they figured out, through love how to support each of us. And so I'm really proud to be part of their family and also to have grown up as a first generation college grad, because it's reminded me how precious education is. It's something I never forget.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. So today, well, first I want to say what I do at the bar. I've been here less than a year, and I am in the role of leading our new diversity, equity, and inclusion training that we're offering to law schools and law firms and companies. And I just feel so passionate about this. I'm an openly transgender attorney, and I spent about a decade doing trans rights litigation at Lambda Legal and at Transgender Legal Defense Fund, mostly in New York. And I feel like when it comes to our legal profession, we just have so much to do in terms of being inclusive. And I feel like there's nothing better that I'd like to spend my career on at this point than trying to make space for the future of our legal profession and to make sure that, we have the right people at the table. And so I've just been really inspired. I've been doing my homework. LSAC has been putting out really, really helpful webinars and about coronavirus, about what to expect. We want to spend, the next, 30 minutes or so just trying to give people information. So I just want to kick off first saying that, we're in this uncertain time and we're getting, every day we're getting more information. So I just watched your webcast that you did last Friday. I know it's online on your website. You probably have a lot of highlights to give people, but is there a place or things that you want to say to people right now and places where people can go read your FAQs that you want to just, kind of flag?
Yeah, Dru, you bet. And first of all, thanks for the work you do, because, as somebody who cares so deeply about equality, I know how difficult the journey of all trans people and And it's something that is so, near and dear to my heart, to just try and make sure that everyone understands that one of the reasons that law is so important is that it can really help restore rights. It can really help build social justice, and that's what we really all need to be devoted to. And now more than ever, anytime a crisis hits, we all know that it doesn't hit equally. It hits some
Yeah.
people harder, and and I've often been known to say that one of the problems with oppression is it's just so darned oppressive.
Mm,
And it really can weigh people down, and when hard times come, it often hits those who have less ability for whatever kind of discrimination or subordination or circumstance they're facing to weather that kind of challenge. So it's really vital right now that we all understand that, keep our commitments to equality. And I think now more than ever is a time for those of us who care about justice and who understand why it matters to redevote ourselves to pursuing it. And I can tell all those candidates who may be nervous right now that we are going to make sure that working with our schools, we keep that pipeline rolling. Those of you who still want to apply for this fall, I know we've had to cancel a March test. We may have to cancel an official administration of other ones, but we're going to make sure you can proceed. We're working at warp speed to develop a remote proctor option. And together with our schools, we're going to make sure this stays smooth. So keep your passion for justice, and we can talk more about it, Dru, but there's going to be a pathway for everyone, and I hope everyone continues to pursue that. We need it.
That's fantastic. I know that you have an FAQ on your website about impact of coronavirus, and people can watch the webinar that I was talking about. I saw there's a recording on there. So I think, just going to lsac.org, is that?
Yes, that would be perfect. lsac.org is really a great starting point. And if you ever don't know where to go, you can also contact me, and I'm serious, Kellye Testy at lsac.org, and I'll make sure you get to the right place.
All
But
right.
lsac.org has a lot of information, and so I really encourage people to look there. We did do that webinar, as you said, last Friday. We're going to also repeat it every 2 weeks until we get through this together. So you can go there to find out how to sign on to that webinar. And then the other thing I want to remind the candidates about, Dru, is that our schools, they all have admission offices, wonderful people that are really devoted, like we are, to the values of inclusion and equity. And those admission deans and admission professionals work really hard to reach out and, help the students feel comfortable. And I know that they're also ready to respond. They're working remotely, but they're on their emails, they're on the phones, and they're ready to help.
Yes. And that brings us to my next question. What I've been hearing from all my law school friends or people who are thinking about going to law school, just generally is a great sense of anxiety, like we all are. I mean, I think that, the levels of the preparation and the dreams that people have of, finishing law school right now or going to law school, it's just, there's so much up in the air. And so we were really picking you as our first person to have on this, mostly because, besides the fact that you're amazing, and big shout out to Judy O'Kelley, my boss, who, you and she go way back, but you're also a parent and you're known as the voice of calm. And so I wanted to kind of ask you to speak directly to a lot of people who will be tuning in, especially LGBTQ plus students who are just experiencing a ton of anxiety. And do you have any tips to share, any mechanisms of coping right now that you can put out there for us?
Sure. And let me break that down and talk first to any current law students who are watching, because as if law school isn't hard enough, now this, right? So I'm teaching law and leadership this term at Villanova. I have a class of 3Ls, and so I'm personally connected with them and understanding again how much this impacts students. And so let me say, first of all, that for the 3Ls, the deans and myself and others are all in conversation with the bar organizations throughout the nation to try and make sure that we're thinking carefully about the bar exam this summer, We know that it's important not to get, delayed if we can help it, because people need to move through and get licensed and move on. But we also know that people have challenge and that there may need to be some accommodation there in terms of the crisis we're facing. So for the 3 Ls, I really feel for you. A lot of you won't have the graduations that you thought you would have. But I hope you'll take comfort in that you have a law degree. You have a license to help people that will never go away. And we are going to need you as we rebuild this country and this world in response to this crisis. So I just want people to know that, everyone has come together to try and help students. I'm seeing a lot of responsiveness on the part of alumni to give to student funds to help with emergencies and things. For the 1 and 2 Ls, a lot of your schools have moved to pass-fail grading to try and take some of that pressure off. Your schools are also in conversation with employers, and we're urging employers to really work with legal education now. Let's not do as much, reactive change as we saw in the Great Recession. Let's work together to help assure the pipeline into the profession. So there's just so many things happening. And, I sometimes like to say, never waste a crisis. There are some good changes that we can make in working more together through this and in thinking more about students. And I've always said, if we can put our students first, a lot else will follow. And I really see people putting students first in a way right now that is impressive.
I
So
love that.
let me start there with the students and say, hang in there and keep your passion, and just make sure you don't feel alone. Reach out to a professor that you feel that you can talk to. They want to help. Your deans I know deans might seem like the scary principal, but I was one for 15 years and I'm not that scary. They want to help. And so, be in touch and let people know what you need, because we want to help every way we can.
That's so helpful. So, I listened to your webinar last week, and I heard from you and a bunch of your guest deans talking about, bringing your passion to the profession. And you just said a little bit more about that. I just thought that was so helpful because, for me, I went to law school a little bit later, and it was because I wanted to kind of up my activism, my LGBT activism. And, like you said, if you have that passion and you want to make change, no matter how difficult this time is, I feel like people really need to hang in.
Yeah.
And, it's been interesting to think about this crisis, like you said, as there's some opportunities there to think about the ways that we're doing things and bring in equity. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Along those lines, I wanted to just share that about almost 20 years ago, when I was thinking about going to law school, I was, at the time, I was identified as queer, maybe bisexual, and I was just realizing I was trans. And it was a really scary time, and I thought, there's no way that this profession will have room for me. I just thought it was hard enough for me to be surviving, in that time period. And so I actually reached out to your organization, Law School Admissions Council, and I found that you had a resource. At the time, it was a VHS tape, and it was, I think it was, I forget what it's called. It was something about, it's similar to your out and in guide, maybe.
Yeah.
It was like, 20 years ago. So it was a VHS. I don't know if I still have it. I don't think I even have a player that could play it, a VHS, but it was just some interviews of LGBT people. And one of the people in it, who are lawyers, and one of the people in it is now Judge Phyllis Fry, who is an openly trans judge in Texas. And it meant so much to me to have those clips. This was, back when there wasn't any openly trans people out there, never mind lawyers that I knew of. And so I just wanted to tell you, thank you, that I know I found that you have more videos online. I watched some of the LGBT students on your website sharing their stories. Some of them I recognize as friends, Alistair and Heron. And so I just want to tell students and people watching to please check out the website to see that. And I hope that you have some similar experience, maybe a little bit more technologically savvy experience of seeing yourself. So thank you to you and your organization for having
Sure.
that.
Yeah, and Dru, that's so funny, and it makes me realize that some of our viewers might not even know what a VHS tape is,
Oh,
right? You know, this thing you used to plug in this big machine and see a movie. But
it's like an
yeah,
eight track.
I remember those VHS tapes, and I also remember that for myself. You know, I graduated from law school in 1991,
Mhm.
and at that time, law schools weren't teaching law and sexuality classes. There was not the visibility at all that there is today. It's not that we don't still have a long way to go, but we had more to go then. And I remember that LSAC used to have that brochure you referred to with the pink triangle on
Yeah.
it. And I
Yeah.
remember that caught my eye.
Mhm.
And I always remember the LSAC was the only organization then that really had that kind of visibility, those kinds of resources. And I think it's something that it's easy to forget, you know, and I know when I was invited to think about being president of LSAC, I remembered that because that
Mhm.
was a real springboard for a lot of us in feeling inclusion.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't know because when they hear LSAC, they think only LSAT. And of course,
Hmm.
no one loves a test, right? So, but the thing that I think a lot of people don't know is that the very founding, like our origination story, was because of equality. Is we found back 75 years ago that law school admissions were largely done in a very biased way. It was based only on GPA, which school you went to, were you the right race, did your dad know the right person? And so the reason we came into an existence with a very fair test that is the test of the skills you actually use is because of our desire to even that playing field. And
Wow.
that was our founding moment. It is our founding value of equity and inclusion. And sometimes that gets lost, but I do want to remind people that, you know, as we've come to understand structural bias, the more you can have a fair process that includes a test that is actually designed for law and actually does get at the three skills that you need for law. You know, I know no one loves a test, but it makes sense. It's your on ramp to learning, and the organization behind it is deeply committed to equity. That's why we exist. It's exactly what we work for. And it's why I was drawn to working with LSAC 2 years ago when I became the president. So you can all count on us to keep that going. And I know that our web pages do have a number of videos. We do a lot of digital campaigns. I think we've done a good job of featuring trans students and others who can show the multiplicity of identities that are in law. And I
Mhm.
do think that because law has been, its bedrock has been the search for equal justice, that there are so many in law who understand that we must keep working for equal justice and
Yeah.
to let everyone thrive, whomever they are, however they identify.
That's a powerful, powerful statement, and I did not know that history. So thank you for sharing that. I
Sure.
will say, just from my own personal experience of my, years of doing litigation and working at, Lambda Legal, the oldest and largest LGBT legal organization,
Yeah.
it really does matter like who's at the table in the profession. And there are so many folks who are lacking. We definitely as a profession have such a problem with
Yeah.
diversity. And so I'm so glad that your organization is pushing this, and that's what you stand for. And I just want to encourage people who are listening that, I think Erin Reeves, the diversity and equity inclusion specialist, said it best. Or she talked about, you may not see someone like you in the profession, and don't let that stop you from going forward and, create that career that you really want to have, even if you don't see anybody like you. So thank you for that work.
Yeah,
And
it's good. It's really good advice, Dru. You know, I never in my entire life would have dreamed I would become a law school professor or dean or LSAC's president. You know, and I think that, you know, it's one of the things that we want to support one another in because I've always believed that when you've been on the wrong side of the way power is used in the world, when you've felt that, whether it's because of race or gender, or sexuality, or some combination of
Mhm.
those, you understand the use of power so differently. And then you're better positioned to be
Yeah.
the one to use power for good. And I think that it's why those of us who have marginalized identities in some way or ways, or who have otherwise somehow seen how oppression works, we're actually the perfect people to try and make things better because we get
Mhm.
it. And
Right.
uh, and that passion, is what we need. We need those voices.
I love that. And I also think that it's been really, given that our profession is like 90% white, as a white trans guy doing diversity, equity, inclusion, I often find opportunities to really speak to other white people because, we need to get our people. And so I feel like everybody has a voice in this kind of the work that we're doing, and it's part of our profession.
Yeah,
And so speaking of that, those kinds of, looking at structural racism and homophobia, transphobia, and ableism, applying that to this moment in time, I've been thinking a lot, like you said, seeing how the coronavirus is impacting, it's affecting all of us, but it's impacting certain people much more who
yeah,
already have, greater health disparities and so on. And I just had
yeah.
an opportunity to write a blog about this. I know that you all been speaking about this to students. Is there anything, and I've heard from students who are feeling like some people in their class who maybe are in a better socioeconomic class, or don't have the same problems that they do right now of trying to work remotely, focus on
Right.
their work. People are really struggling, and struggling in different ways, like
Yeah,
survival ways. So I don't know, is there anything that you could speak to about that kind of giving people a pep talk or just
sure.
acknowledging that?
Yeah, no, it's such a critical point right now because, there are some people that are in the mode right now where this is like a vacation. They're holed up in some
Right.
lovely place looking at the water and, ordering in from gourmet places or whatever it might be. And there are many people, who are really struggling where family members are ill, they have ongoing medical needs that now are compromised. And we've seen through the way this virus has been characterized too, the, ugly racism,
Yeah.
come up. So, anytime there's strife, the tendency is on some people that the kinds of ways of, using power badly will come out. And of
Yeah.
course that's happening. And then, you also have people that are trying to be at home learning remotely, who have childcare, elder care, um, and when you're sitting there trying to think about how can I just feed my family,
Mhm.
it's a little hard to pay attention to secured transactions, or
Yeah.
whatever it might be,
Yeah.
right? So, I laugh, but it isn't honestly funny. It's really difficult. And so I think that, I would hope that what we can all do is that there are so many good people in this world. And I can tell you that, being here in Seattle, where we've been at the start, the real epicenter
Mhm.
of this virus, the kind of wonderful humanity that's come out and the kind of, giving, and the healthcare workers and all that they're sacrificing, it's inspirational. So I think that what we can do is what we should always do when times are tough. And it's remember every bit of privilege we have and
Mhm.
try and use that to help someone else and to be a force for good, because it does magnify. Um, I can certainly tell you all that I've been uplifted this last couple of weeks just by a small thing, which is that a few women decided to send each other some, quote or poem or something, just to say, I know leadership's hard right now. Here's something I hope, lifts your spirit. That's a small matter, but whether
Mhm.
it's giving someone, food they need, transportation they need, in the doing and the giving, we also receive, and
Mhm.
it also will help bolster mood when we have that gratitude and that ability to give.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I'll say about it though is that all sounds in some ways a little Pollyannish, and I do recognize that no matter what we do on that score, this is terrible. This is a terrible time, and there'll be a lot of hardship. And then I think helping people to grieve through that
Mhm.
and hope that we can, turn this crisis again toward a place where we do come out of it better, with better approaches to the way we all live together so that we can all live together.
Yeah. One of the things I picked up on in the webinar last week was that there are possibly some upsides to what's happening in terms of the opportunities for equity. And the example that someone was talking about like, not everybody has the money to go visit a law school, for example, right? But now everybody's doing these virtual tours. It was interesting to think about some of the ways that, there's been some leveling of, where let's rethink, do we really need to have those kinds of barriers for people,
Yeah.
right? And so that's given me a little bit of inspiration. So
That's a good comment, Dru. And I think that, when when everybody's in the same boat with being able to just, see the same show, right?
yeah.
Or it doesn't cost more to go to this school plus these two, that's
Mm-hmm.
good. And I do want to say to the candidates out there that I know the schools really want to give you as much information as they can right now. They're eager to talk to you on the phone and through the web. And one of the things that a candidate asked me the other day, they said, well, how can I really get to know the culture of a place if I can't visit it? And I said, well, I would really urge you to be in touch with the admission office and get several names of alumni, get names of current students, and talk to them and ask them the kind of things you would if you were there in person, because just in terms of how they respond to you and how that goes, you'll learn a lot. And talk to a couple employers in the city if it's not a city you're familiar with. But
Yeah.
it is a comfortable. It is something that people want to help with, and I think
Yeah.
we can get that information.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love
yeah.
that.
I'll just share one more funny
Yeah,
story, and that is
please.
that one of a student that I know also said to me, they said, Kellye, I kind of like not being in school because it's kind of junior high-ish, and now I can just be an adult with my computer,
That's true. Good point. I also just spoke to a queer woman of color who is a law student, and she was just asked to be on one of those like online plenaries to talk to prospective students. So maybe it's something that people, if you're out there and you are LGBTQ, like this would be a good time maybe to volunteer to try to help out, to talk to students, because you could reach out to the
Yes,
next generation. It's never too early to think about who's coming up behind you. Like I'm at the point in
I
my
agree.
career, I'm going to turn 45 this weekend, and I'm like, my career is all about making space for you. You know what I mean? Like for the
Yeah,
students who are coming behind me, the lawyers who have way more energy, way more ideas, and so even if you're in law school, you already are in a place of privilege where you can help people who maybe who would never consider going to law school. Like it's never
yes,
too early, right, to start kind of making that pathway for the people behind you and making
yes.
sure it's inclusive as possible.
That pipeline building and that the way you think about that, Drew, is exactly what we should do, because the access to information and even the
Mm,
dream of becoming a lawyer
yeah,
is unequally distributed too. And so we have to
yeah,
help open those windows of possibility for people and to say, yes, you can, you
yeah.
know. And I know the first time someone said to me, well, you could do that, I was, I had to think, what? And
Me too.
so
Yeah,
helping that happen is really critical at a time like this,
yeah.
particularly, but always. And I'm really mindful right now that a lot of our summer pipeline building programs, where we have groups of high school or college students come to law school campuses and learn about law, a lot of those can't happen now in person.
Mhm.
And so we're working to try and think about an online program that we could create and ways we could create community within that, so that that pipeline building continues. And
That's
that's
great.
something that will be aided if everyone can, sometimes it's like each one teach one, each one reach one, and try and help keep that rolling, because we really do need those voices like yours in the legal profession, Dru.
Yes, thank you. So, and just final question, and if there's any final, things you want to say, stepping away from the crisis, and, we're prioritizing at the LGBT bar, this diversity, equity, inclusion with this Lavender Law 365 program. We're going to be doing more stuff online and having offerings like this. But can you say anything about what law schools are doing about LGBTQ plus inclusion, or things that we want to see more of, and just in general?
Yeah, well, I think that law schools on the whole had made some really good progress, toward inclusion and climate and all the things that they should have been doing. And obviously, a lot of us have been worried in the last stretch of time with leadership nationally whether some of that progress would be rolled back, and it has been in some ways. So it's something that we just have to keep pushing on, and I liken it, again, it's why it's so hard. When you work for equality, it's like you're pushing a boulder up a hill. And if you relax, it comes back. And, and if you turn your attention away to something else, it comes back. So that constant pressure from every one of us, wherever we can touch it and wherever we can push, is just so vital. And anytime when you have a crisis like this that's occupying so much of our attention, we all know that equity inclusion will be one of the first things to lose its stature. Yeah. Everyone will be so busy doing what they think of as the emergency that, they'll be like, well, there's crisis matters. But that's a crisis too. It has been in our world for a long time. So we have to keep that visibility. We have to keep our hands pushing together. And I think that, I work with the deans of law schools, so many of them around the country. For years, I've helped lead a program that encourages women, people of color, LGBTQ, everyone who's got, in any sense, different identity than someone might think of as the typical law school dean, to think about deaning. And so I can just tell you from knowing so many of the law school deans around the US that they're deeply committed to doing the right thing. Doesn't mean it's always easy or it goes perfectly, as I well know from the seat I was in. But I think you have in legal education as a whole a deep commitment to advancing equity. And so I really urge students to continue to talk to one another. And then one really important thing, and it's why I'm so happy to talk to you today, is it's not just in the law schools, it's reaching out to organizations like yours, to law firms where there's been great movement. And so, and some of the big firms particularly are real leaders. Some of the businesses are real leaders. And so, in equality, consciousness raising and solidarity and working across lines and boundaries and really reaching out to one another, that's what always matters.
No, thank you so much for your mentorship for me and everybody. And in the words of Judge Phyllis Fry from your VHS video, when I emailed her that I was in law school and that I was trans, she wrote back one line, "Thank you for being out." And I've always held on to that. So thank you for being out, Kellye. And, it really does make a difference to me and everybody else watching, to have, openly LGBT leadership at the level that you've been at for so many years. So thank you. And so finally, I just want to tell people, please sign up for membership for the National LGBT Bar and support LSAC and the LGBT Bar if you can. Law students membership is only $40 a year, and it means that you get to come to our Lavender Law Conference, which will be in DC August 12th to 14th for free, if you're a member. So also subscribe to us on YouTube and follow us. We're going to be doing more of these online content to keep everybody feeling like they're surrounded by community. Kellye, thank you so much for being on here as our first guest. Is there any final things you want to say to folks?
I would just close by saying a huge thank you to you. It's been a great pleasure having this conversation with you. We could talk for hours,
Yeah.
and it's really just great to be able to have a chance to say to the law students and the candidates and others that this is a time when keeping the legal education system strong has never been more important, because if we're not strong, the profession's not strong, and if it's not strong, then equality is going to suffer. So Keep your passion. Thanks for all you're doing. Let me and LSAC know any way we can help. And Dru, thanks to you, Jody, and everyone for the good work you're doing to connect all of us.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. See you next time.